right, we will go ahead and get started. So hello, welcome. Welcome to the actual event at the actual time. So sorry to the folks who got caught up in the scheduling nonsense and all of that stuff. My apologies. Thank you so much for coming. Welcome to our STS-IL committee chat on using AI in the classroom. I'm Sam Zellick. I use she, her pronouns. I'm coming from UNC Wilmington. I'm just the chatty one who's emceeing today. Thank you to also my fellow committee members, Jenn Sams, Hannah Rozier, Erica Lopez, Aaron Thomas, and Evan Fruhoff, who's not actually, I don't think, here yet today. But everybody has helped make this event possible and get this all set up. And I think it's going to be fabulous. We're here to talk a little bit about how library folks are actually using AI in the classroom, rather than just, I think everybody is talking about AI constantly these days, but hearing actual examples from folks who are using AI, it's going to be a lot of fun. So we've got some really fantastic presenters queued up for very short lightning talks, and we will cap everything off with a Q&A. So please either hold your questions or note them in this webinar's Q&A section. You are welcome to drop them in there, and we will work on answering as many as we can. We will be recording this, and we will send it out to everybody who's registered. If you don't receive it, send one of us an email, and we'll make sure that you get access to it. If panelists are willing and able to share any slides or visuals, we'll also share those materials. But our panelists today are Helene Gold from University of Kentucky, Jody Coulter from Michigan State, Clarissa Eisen from American University over in DC, Helen Bischoff from University of Kentucky, Dory Schaefer from Michigan Tech, and Kelly Getz from Eastern Michigan. And because we do not have a ton of time, we are just going to go right down in order and have folks start sharing their lightning talks. So Helene, I'm going to nominate you first. Awesome. And by nominate you first, I mean they're in a list.
Thank you so much. We'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. I am really glad to be here to share my flipped lesson plans I'm developing for first-year human ecology students to use ChatGPT in their research projects. So I serendipitously met this biology faculty member at a Center for Teaching and Learning event using AI in the classroom, and we were really excited to discover our mutual interests, and this course will be taking place in April. So our goals are for students to discover when ChatGPT is most and least helpful, to introduce students to librarians and library resources, and to build confidence through their existing research familiarity. So in Canvas, the flipped lesson is going to include information about what exactly is ChatGPT, creating the account, practice prompting, exploring the strengths and weaknesses of ChatGPT, and navigating to the library website to use Primo, our ILS discovery tool, and library databases. So one of the main themes I'm developing that runs throughout my lesson is emphasizing exactly what GPT does and what it doesn't do, and putting particular emphasis on the fact that it is not a search engine, but rather a predictive text tool. And also, we should proceed with caution. We all know about hallucinations. ChatGPT 3.5 is only current through June of 21. And of course, there are issues with bias and privacy. So I often begin many lessons by emphasizing how students already have research skills and they're already engaging with AI technology, like how Google Docs and texting apps use predictive text to autocomplete while typing, and we're just applying these experiences in a structured scholarly environment. So this lesson includes information about how ChatGPT can be useful in academic work, such as brainstorming topics, summarizing complex ideas. And we start with an example of a simple prompt to generate paper topic ideas. But then we move on to expansion, to expand on one of the ideas into more prompts that get students a little bit more specificity. So I emphasize the importance of learning how to converse with ChatGPT through specific prompting and by carrying on a conversation within the initial prompt. The more specific the prompt, the better. So providing it with a role and providing detailed instructions will produce better results. So when you give ChatGPT a role to play, in this case, an academic librarian, it will provide you academic paper topic ideas, but reading ChatGPT refer to itself as an academic librarian is fine. This is fine, I suppose. So my existential crisis aside, it does indeed provide a great list. Often including language that we see in academic literature, like in this case, colony collapse disorder. We also ask GPT to provide keywords and phrases that we can use for database searching, which again, it does quite well. In class, when we meet, students are going to use their topics to practice using prompts, modify their prompts, generate and verify citations using Google and Primo ILS, as well as locating sources in subscription databases. So I use an example in Canvas to emphasize again that ChatGPT isn't a search engine and doesn't do a very good job generating real citations, although colleagues have told me in the paid subscription 4.0 version does a much better job of this, hallucinates less than the current free 3.5 version. So we'll practice generating and checking citations in Google. If it's a real citation, we should see it in the first few results. And in this case, you'll see this is not a real citation. But we will also use Primo to locate the full text for articles that do indeed exist, like this one. So we decided not to include the lesson on comparing ChatGPT text to ebooks, which I originally was working on. But the idea was to have students compare a scholarly encyclopedia entry to ChatGPT text and practicing specific prompting as well as critical reading. Finally, I am providing opportunities for metacognitive feedback in Canvas using the what, so what, now what, as well as using Mentimeter in class to clarify questions and improve engagement.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Also, very solid timing on that. Thank you, Helene. Much appreciated. All right, we are going to switch over to Jody Coulter.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, that was solid timing. I don't think my timing will be quite like that. My name is Jody Coulter. My pronouns are she, her. I am the life sciences librarian at Michigan State. And we are very fortunate here because university admin have been very supportive of exploring AI in the classroom. And as a result, we've gotten a lot of requests about using AI for our instruction sessions. We're now working with entire departments on how to responsibly incorporate AI into their thinking and about the ramifications of its use. As an institution, I have to say that we recognize that these tools are here to stay. They're already here, as Helene mentioned. You can find them everywhere from, social media. If you're using grammar or spell check in any app, that's also a function of AI. And so to sort of fight against them or to ban their use, I think is, in our view, a disservice to our students. So we approach instruction from this: how do you use AI tools responsibly? I'm going to go share my screen really quick just so that I can show you what some of this actually looks like. For this class, this is a specific class that I'm going to be talking about. The instructor sort of wanted us to explore how ChatGPT could be used for both exploring topics as well as providing a search strategy. One of the very first things that I do in pretty much any AI classroom is start off with these reminders. We constantly come back to these. There are a lot of AI tools out there. ChatGPT might not be the tool for you. You need to, of course, verify all of your data. Your data is being shared, so it's not private. There are bias involved, and then you need to ask questions in multiple ways. Just because asking it in one way is not going to work. When we actually look at ChatGPT, in this case, we were looking at different reproductive strategies for different species. As Helene mentioned, I start off very broadly. I mean, this is like, you know, I want to talk about rhinoceros, but I don't even know what rhinoceros species are out there. So we start off very broadly. I go into, okay, sure. So what are the reproductive strategies? That list them all out. We talk about, you know, specific names for reproductive strategies, which is asking the same question, but in a different way. I give time for students to actually test this themselves, and then we start talking about search strategy. Again, just like Helene, I use ChatGPT to come up with keyword lists. This is actually not a great keyword list because it doesn't split up the themes into different topics. So we talk about that. So for example, you might want to ask specifically about the name and the scientific name for a white rhinoceros, but then you're also going to want to get a separate list of keywords for reproductive strategy. I'm a little bit embarrassed because ChatGPT does an awesome job of describing what a search strategy is and how to put one together. One of the hilarious things about this, though, is that it ends up with this monster, which is just huge. I mean, it's just a massive search strategy. So what we do after I, you know, show them this particular response is we test it. We test it in databases, and we try it out specifically in Web of Science for this one. We test it out in Web of Science. I think we got 2 responses. And so then I start editing. We take out the bottom half here. We cut this out and we get a few more responses. We cut out some of these words for reproductive strategies. We might change strategy and add an asterisk. So we're really testing out what a search strategy is, how it functions, all using this ChatGPT search strategy that they developed. One thing I do want to mention, though, is that I very rarely actually type anything in ChatGPT in the classroom. I think it's a waste of time, my time and the students' time, for them to watch me type out full sentences and to watch ChatGPT actually produce it. If somebody has a very specific question, for example, this particular student was like, I am coming up with like not very many synonyms for climate change, then we might actually test it out in real time. And I do try to, like, you know, make room for that. I do try to actually have some test time for them. I think in total, this is a long class. This is a 90-minute class. Long class. It's a 90-minute class. So we have about, I think, 20 minutes total for testing out the first part and then testing out the second part of this particular class. And I'm done.
No, fabulous. Thank you so much. And Clarissa, you are up next.
Hi, everyone. My most common information literacy session is a one-shot session, and I'm often asked to include talking about ChatGPT with everything else that I already talk about in those one-shots. Think databases, scholarly versus popular, what is a peer review, whatever. As a result, I really only have about 5 minutes I was able to carve out for that discussion. So you are going to experience that discussion that I have right now. My institution does not have a university-wide policy for generative AI. Some professors explicitly ban it, some are okay with its use, and some really want to actively encourage using it. So I also have to have a strategy that allows for all of the variety. Each professor also gets to make up their own consequences for its use. So I begin my discussion about ChatGPT by explaining what generative AI is, asking if they've used it before. If a professor is really against generative AI use, I'll tell that professor to close their eyes and then ask students to raise their hand. And I usually get a lot more hand raises that second time when the professor is not looking. I ask students if they've heard about it, what they know about how it works. We'll talk about that. And then I go through and discuss what it is, as the people before me have mentioned, how it works in comparing it to our phone or text word predictors. My emphasis when I'm teaching is on the fact that it is just predicting our words and predicting what is likely to come next. It is just a tool. It does not know right from wrong. It does not know truth from fiction. So after I do that, I show this fantastic image. It's a little tongue-in-cheek, but that's my style. So I bring students to the top. I start at the start and I say, does it matter if your output is true? Yes or no? Usually it's yes. So then we talk about, do you have the expertise to verify if that information is accurate? Once again, this is kind of a yes or no thing. We talk about discernment and deciding if you are an expert and what it means when we have these hallucinations and how hard they can be to identify. So at this point, once we get to that yes or no, the next question is, are you able and willing to take responsibility for this? And I let the professor talk. I always tell them we'll have a co-conversation if they do want me to talk about ChatGPT, because every person at my institution is different. I can't say any blanket statement. So I make the professors join me in this conversation, and they'll all have their own different process during this. If a professor is open to using ChatGPT, that would be a good time for me to come in and discuss some things that ChatGPT is good for. We've seen some of this already with the other presenters, but I like to mention using it for keywords, talking about different groups or organizations that are related to a topic and who might publish on it, or for working through some coding if necessary. It's also important that I point out, I did not create this infographic. This was created by Alexander Tilkanov. I don't remember where I found it, but it is very helpful for my instruction. And shockingly, I finished in 4.5 minutes, not even less.
Well done. Truly honed from practice in one shots. If someone has the answer to why does everybody think we can cover everything in a one shot, let me know. I think we all want that answer. Helen Bischoff, you are next.
Hello. Let me share my screen just a moment. Can you all see my screen, or are you all seeing my presenter slides?
We are, unfortunately.
Well, shoot.
It
Okay.
happens to me every time.
Ah,
Although if you hit from beginning and then you go up to the top and it'll you'll be able to swap the display view and the presenter view.
okay.
Should be up in display settings. Yeah.
Here we go. All right. I'm Helen Bischoff. I'm the coordinator of liaison services and STEM librarian at University of Kentucky. And I'm going to share a few different ways that I've used AI, so it's not necessarily just a single lesson. I've used AI in 2 main ways for instructional design. I've used it as a feedback loop and also for creating stuff from scratch. And so I'm going to give you a few concrete examples that I've used here. So in a graduate course that was focused on universal design for learning for STEM TAs, I wanted to ensure that my own lesson plan was also in alignment with those UDL guidelines. So I prompted ChatGPT to give me feedback on my lesson. I asked it to know weaknesses, strengths, improvements, and I, of course, included all the UDL guidelines with it as well. I did make changes based on the feedback, but in order for this exercise to be effective, like many of you have already said, it's correlated to how detailed your prompts are. So I provided a really robust lesson plan with map standards and learning objectives. Now, when I tested AI to create lesson plan templates, I thought the basic outline was helpful, especially for someone who's new and getting started. But for developing any kind of innovative content to populate the lesson, I got really basic lesson plans back that required a lot more design work and creativity. And honestly, it was easier for me to just start from scratch in that regard. When I further prompted Gemini to give me something that was more creative, you'll see a screenshot here. It suggested writing a farewell email for a teacher at a school. and said it was still learning. So it also was struggling to give me what I wanted to. As far as an outline or a template, I do think it's helpful for that. And it's something I still recommend if you're trying to standardize your lesson plan template, or if you're looking for kind of a checklist for your own instruction. For in-class engagement, I've used it in several different ways, but I'm going to highlight 3. In a composition course that was focused on writing a STEM research paper, we used AI for a time management exercise. In this case, we used Copy AI to generate a schedule to help the students stay on track with all the assignments. However, what the students found is that the outputs really lacked the personalization they were looking for, and it was leading to unrealistic timelines. Students specifically noted that, well, AI doesn't know how fast they read, doesn't understand any kind of educational accommodations they might need, or how long it takes to use services like ILO or the Writing Center, or setting up a research consultation. They did adjust their prompts to include more information that they felt comfortable with, but ultimately found that the professor did it the best. So we compared those outputs. I've also used ChatGPT, Google Gemini, and Canva Magic Write in class and in one-on-ones with students to help them develop keyword banks. So not unlike what all of our other presenters were talking about today, and developing subtopics to narrow their search. Students also noted that when they had very recent topics, that it yielded more generic or inaccurate outputs. And that was always a really good opportunity for discussion. The last way is I've had students use ChatGPT to assist with scripting VR experiences they were developing for Lexington, Kentucky locations. This exercise provided a pretty good outline for blocking and transition, but the content was too generic because the research was too nuanced. And their research relied heavily on collections that were not accessible online. So students said the script exercise was helpful because their course was a pilot course and it didn't really go into as much depth about scripting as they would have hoped. Now, with all of these examples that I'm giving you, discussion and comparison were essential. So we discussed and we compared all of the examples that we were using. And I consider this pretty much kind of a cornerstone whenever you're using AI or really any tool that supports research. It always benefits from discussion and really kind of reflecting about what the tool is, how it assists you, what you bring to the tool, and so on and so forth. So I do recommend building in that kind of time. One of my favorite AI discussions was with a class reading Dr. Sophia Noble's book, Algorithms of Oppression. Obviously, these students quickly highlighted AI's inherent biases, since all of its outputs rely on existing biased information systems. And I think this further emphasizes the importance of that critical engagement and creating space for those students. So some reflections I'll share is ChatGPT was not a consistent tool in early 2023, so I had to experiment with a lot of tools. And as several people have said, I recommend flipping as much content as you can, and we never required students to set up personal accounts. And that was something that was decided on between myself and the faculty members.
That's very fair. Thank you so much. Awesome. Dory Schaefer. You are up next.
Okay, so and that's up now. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a specific instance where I kind of was able to go beyond a one-shot and integrate AI info literacy into an entire classroom, working with an instructor that I work really, really well with. So background for this is I'm an instructional librarian at a regional technological university. It's heavily engineering focused. And I began incorporating generative AI into sessions beginning in spring 2023 when this first became a big topic and people were starting to ask for it. But I never got into a lot of depth or assurance that instructors were reinforcing what I was saying about it outside of the library instruction session, because everybody has so many different views and ways of looking at these tools, as a few people have mentioned already. So the class in this question that we got is an economics, game theory, and strategic behavior class for upper level students. It was mostly engineering students, but there was also a few economics students, business students, computer science students, and it was really fun opportunity to work with students who already are digging into this stuff and know a lot already. The faculty member was a new faculty who had really enjoyed a previous course integrated literature review session that I'd done with her the last semester called Bibliography Bingo. And she wanted to figure out how we could maintain the previous level of info-lit instruction and student engagement with myself, the librarian, while exploring some of these generative AI tools in their writing. So what did we do? I love this picture very much. So in the previous session, it was a really standard course integrated one-shot that we do a lot at our library that's really fun called Bibliography Bingo. We spend the first few minutes, 15 minutes, focusing on literature reviews and how to use different types of articles and how to use them as jumping off points. And then most of the session is dedicated to an active learning bingo game where students have time to use their own subjects and look up different articles related to their topic that meet these different categories. It's super fun. There's lots of student librarian interaction because I go around and visit every group and I ask them what's working, what's not. So they all get some actual like one-on-one time with me and advice. So it's a really great session, but it doesn't have a lot of time for a lot of AI instruction. So this is an example of the card that we used, just so that you can see what types of things we were doing. And in the new session, what we did is we had an AI-focused assignment plus that standard course integrated one-shot. So the assignment was prior to the library session, and this worked into their building up a whole entire assignment to have a literature review at the end. Prior to our session, they used ChatGPT or another generative AI tool to generate a literature review and sources on their chosen topic. And then they were tasked with tracking down those AI generated sources. So once they came into the library session with me, which was very similar to our typical bibliography bingo sessions, I just included a discussion of those AI generated sources and what they were finding, and then the potential legitimate uses for these tools in a literature review. And then we went back into the bibliography bingo. So what I found with this was that the students really, really had a firm grasp already because they've done this exercise and they went through and they're like, none of these were real. The sources were all fake and they were all very frustrated. And that's not something I've experienced with other students who weren't able to do an assignment related to it beforehand. So these students already knew more, and it meant that they were able to be more aware of the issues related to using generative AI as sources, as well as brainstorming creative ways to actually use it well for their assignments. So they were all able to build on that and use that experience to conduct really great literature searches in our library databases. And they were able to still get that great feedback and one-on-one instruction with me so they get suggestions on where to go next with their searching. So they didn't lose out on any of that this time. They were still added in to everything, including Gen AI. So it was really, really fantastic. And we got great feedback from both the instructors and the students. And it was really just a great experience overall, my best working with AI in the classroom so far. And I hope to repeat it in the future, working with other instructors to have them, do work with the students beforehand so they know more before they're coming to me. So please connect with me. I'm friendly. I'd love to gab and collab. There's my contact info.
Thank you so much. All of these have been so exciting to hear about. And last but most certainly not least, Kelly Getz.
I'm here. I'm just trying to make sure I'm sharing
No
right.
worries, you're good.
Share, and I have mine on a Google slideshow. That look okay? Okay, cool. So what I'm going to talk about is how I used Perplexity AI in a one-shot biochemistry lesson. The context of this class, it was an upper level writing intensive biochemistry course. It was 1.5 hours that I got to work with the students, and it was one shot with kind of a semi-flip format. About 12 students with no prior library instruction. And they have a semester-long assignment that they're working on in this class, which is to write a research proposal, which includes the summary, hypothesis, specific aims, research questions. So the basic like NIH format for a research proposal for any basically biochem project. And originally the professor who asked me to talk about AI had read about it in this Washington Post article, specifically Perplexity AI. And to be frank, there was some professor shuffling. So I actually didn't know I would be teaching with AI or talking about AI until kind of the last minute when the new professor said, hey, by the way, can you teach that to my class now? Which meant that I had to put this together very, very quickly. But the outline was a flipped class with an assignment where they could set up their library accounts ahead of time, which would save us a lot of time, and then watch some instructional videos about the library basics, like Boolean searching and peer review. And then in class, we had a discussion of types of sources like we usually do, kind of the basic library instruction. And then we went into like the good, bad, and ugly of generative AI and what it was. And then we experimented as a class with using Perplexity AI for generating research topics. And as I said, I didn't have a ton of time to plan, and I wanted some visuals that would help explain to the students what generative AI was. And I found this group. I still don't know too much about them, but they have a whole bunch of free, beautiful visuals that help explain how to define generative AI and then some strategies for working with it. So I've got the link in the slides that we'll share. So if you were ever looking for a visual, this is a quick and dirty place to find it. So we talked about the good and how mainly, like as a class, we generated some of these this was some of their ideas and some of mine, how generative AI can make science more understandable. It can help students with learning disabilities or gaps in knowledge. It can help students phrase their questions, reduce language barriers. It can help with writing and writing examples. The bad, as we talked about before, there are hallucinations that might pop up. And this could also, things that are not humanly discernible or that are inaccurate. And the information could be out of date, like only up until a certain time is indexed or used as data in some of these generative AIs. And then the ugly, that biased in the data can lead to bias in the results. I recommend this YouTube video from somebody who talks about counting all the way out to the edges and how even like how it's important to pay attention to the outer 20% of individuals and how we don't want to ignore that and that can be magnified by machine learning algorithms. Okay, just a minute. Sorry, spring break. So Perplexity AI is really cool because it actually gives sources. One of the people in that first article calls this Google with sources. And I'm going to actually jump out of here so I can show you some examples of using it. So this is an example of a clarifying question. Actually, my husband had for his earth science class. What is deuterium and how does it relate to glacial determination of climate? So it actually gives an answer that's a summary of the information, but the cool thing it does is actually gives sources and shows images. So you can actually find this fairly complicated concept explained in this image here. And then we can test out some of the prompts that we might give Perplexity AI. And so in this example, you can see that if you are specific, I'm writing an NIH research proposal as an assignment in my undergraduate biochemistry course. Can you suggest some research questions that would be appropriate for this kind of assignment? What we found was if we feed it something like this that's highly specific, it gives us more reliable or more academic sources. Okay, I've got one more to show you. And then I wanted to show you, I actually asked Perplexity where it gets its data from, and it probably does not read behind a paywall. So that's one of the downsides of it. But kind of the cool thing is that you can talk back and forth with it. So if it gave me emerging research topics in biochemistry, I can ask it to focus on endometriosis. I can ask it to show me academic articles for one of those topics. And then I can actually ask it for some keywords, and it hasn't done great with keywords. The pro version apparently has an academic setting, which I have not experimented with. Okay, the end.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Oh, amazing. Awesome. Okay, so that's all of our lightning talk. Also, well done to everybody. I am so impressed at how much content that we have gotten into, like literally like half an hour of stuff. So we've kind of been poking at the Q&A a little bit as we go through all of this, but I do think there have been a lot of questions in general about other tools that folks have used, which I think some folks have touched on already. Is there any other tools for any of our panelists that you've used that you didn't get to touch on, but really wanted to mention as something that you've been using? Pretty much good.
Yeah,
Much
so,
covered. Yeah.
When I first did this class, I was really excited because it was upper level economics. And I was like, oh, these are going to be senior economics students, and we can go into depth with some of these more like actual literature review focused AI tools. I can't pull any of the names off the top of my head anymore, but there's ones that build webs and look at different pieces of literature and stuff that aren't necessarily generative AI. And I really was excited to use those tools, but in this case, it was like a broader swath of different majors, so it wasn't appropriate for them. But I'm really excited to use those tools in other classes beyond these generative kind of ChatGPT tools.
Yeah.
And just to read a few that have shown up in the questions, because people are responding to the questions, which I super appreciate. Research Rabbit has come up, Cite AI. A few people were talking about Scopus, which is of course a little limiting just due to not a little, it's a lot limiting due to funding, are some big ones that are coming out over and over again. So yeah, if you haven't been keeping an eye out over on the Q&A section, definitely take a peek there. And yeah.
I have used Research Rabbit. I used it with, it wasn't in a STEM class. It was a group of upper level researchers in a Spanish language course. And so we used Research Rabbit, and we've also used Semantic Scholar, and we compared like the outputs between those two and set up alerts for the type of research that they were doing in that course. And afterwards, we asked students to give us feedback on what they thought about the platforms, if they found them helpful or if they found them a barrier to the research, because they were upper level students. And so at that point, they had had a decent amount of time with doing academic research. And surprisingly, most of them said, I probably won't use it. So I was surprised, but I think it was because they already knew how to use a lot of the tools, and they were like, I don't really want this or need it. So I was surprised by their response.
I have used Connected Papers. I use that to teach a class about bias and citational justice. So that's a lot of fun. You get 3 free searches a month. So that's really interesting way to do things too.
This is sort of tangentially related to what Helen was saying. One of the things that I noticed one of the things we ask our students is, how many of you are already using ChatGPT? And these are large classrooms. They're probably close to 100 students. And I would say a good 3/4 are telling us that they aren't using them at all. And the reason is because they are afraid of being told that they're cheating. So when we show them the tools that are already embedded into the databases, and there are a lot of them, you just have to kind of like look around, they feel, I think, a little bit more comfortable because they're databases maybe that they're already using, or databases that feel more authentic because they're actually linked from the library website. So if you're looking to break into it without like being, like too limiting or going outside of the libraries, looking at those database tools are a great way to go.
That's a question I actually wanted to ask more broadly, and that is, ProQuest One has an embedded AI component. Other databases like EBSCO, I think their new interface coming out this summer has more of an AI component. So, and they're using AI around their metadata as well. That's a whole other conversation, but I'm curious what your experience, so like my fellow panelists and also folks who are here of using ProQuest One and other subscription databases with their new AI tools and what they found, because I have not done yet.
Apparently neither have we.
Too soon.
I'll share, this is gonna be kind of a bit brief, but like I did beta test the Scopus AI, which I think the idea of our own native databases having a natural language query that kind of connects you with relevant literature instead of having to learn Boolean, which sorry, I know some people like it, but I'm like, as soon as we can get rid of Boolean, I'm all for it. And I feel like that function for me, I could see being very useful, and I'm like all for these publishers figuring out really good natural language AI, generative AI ways to connect people's search with relevant literature. But I also like, I'm always skeptical of how much more they're going to charge us when they add on the little AI, like, oh, you want the AI? Why don't you pay us more money? And I think if users know, like, oh, yes, of course I want to try the AI, then here we are, like, stuck paying for it. And so I'm kind of interested in some of these open access, you know, tools that are not asking us for any money. But then there are limits to that, because what's their corpus and how much, you know, is being left out of what they're able to search in, say, a Research Rabbit or, you know, connected papers in these places. So it's a complicated field, and I think we're all kind of like trying to play around with it, but that's a great question.
And I know,
Agreed.
sorry, go ahead. I just was gonna note that JSTOR is trying this too, but I haven't tried it yet, so it's not useful information. Go ahead.
Definitely. I mean, like Scopus is already charging for their independent standalone, you know, AI tool. I have been on the beta testing for Clarivate. That's been super fascinating to see. Their AI tool has actually been incredibly useful. I have no idea if they're going to charge separate, if they're following Scopus. I would say yes, definitely. So yeah, those I would say are, yeah.
So since Clarivate owns Ex Libris, I'm very curious to see what that's going to look like down the road of having that more thoroughly integrated into everything that we do from that standpoint, from the ILS integration. So interesting.
Definitely. I mean, and like these tools, I went to the AAAS conference in February. Everybody was talking about the Scopus AI tool. If everybody's using Scopus AI, nobody's using Scopus, we might see, you know, one replacing the other. I would not be surprised. So.
Super interesting. I'm just scrolling through the Q&A here because yeah, I think like a lot of the questions of like how do we run these things locally? Like the somebody else mentioned the JSTOR AI and Constellate tools as well, which I like have been asked to sign up, but I haven't done it yet, right? And so it seems like all of these are just happening basically now, right? Like these are all just like starting to come online between beta testing and everything else, which is really interesting. I'm just scrolling through to see. I know somebody asked about AI chatbots and reference chat, which is something I feel like I keep hearing about, but have not. Someone also mentioned they've been asked if they were a chatbot in reference chats, which we have too several times now. We had to put in a note that was like, we are humans, please be nice to us in our reference chat.
I will say, I feel like it's been a good way to promote our chat service. Like I make a joke usually in a class to say like, hey, there's a real human behind this chat. And like that's not a whole conversation about AI necessarily, but you know, in some ways I think that people are like familiar with chat now more like in the different variations. So it's been kind of fun to use that as an example in class.
Yeah, I do something very similar with our chat. And I get very positive responses from people who are like, oh, thank goodness, there's an actual person behind one of these chats. And I use it all the time at the library because I'm very against using a chat bot for our chats ever. And so I try to use it to be like, but people like us to be real people on the other end so that I can argue against that for my own personal I like people arguments here.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that like our university website put one on there and it didn't know anything about the library, and we were like, okay, so cool, thanks. Not a reference chatbot, but you know, it's like, thank you. Thank you for not knowing that we had a library. Sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
I'm curious if anybody here has gotten does anybody have institution-wide access to any like ChatGPT or yeah?
Copilot specifically.
Copilot?
We actually just see, also part of the, I'm realizing now I don't have any access to put a like link into something for y'all because I can't ask a question. I just found this out. So if you Google UNC Wilmington Copilot, you'll find it. But we have this is actually a question I wanted to ask too, so thank you. Along with that data privacy thing, our institution agreed to get an institutional copy of Copilot from Microsoft only if it would do a like don't collect our data version, which is what we have. So it doesn't save any of the data that we put into it. It doesn't feed off of any of that, which I find really interesting. And wonder if that would be interesting to compare to like a regular version of Copilot. I know we've talked about ChatGPT. It's something that they're still talking about because of some weird licensing stuff, but I would love to hear from other folks too.
Sam, we just rolled out Copilot at USF as well.
Nice.
With the similar, bulk of us have got the for web version, which
Yeah.
is like free with it all, but a handful of us have gotten into a program that Microsoft's worked with us on for the work version, which interfaces with a bunch of different tool sets. Yeah, really
Write
cool
that down,
stuff.
figure out which one we have.
Yeah. Honestly, the biggest frustration I've had with it, though, is that because Microsoft dropped that one version with just everyone who had access, it means that we now have the entire university who has no training on how to use AI with AIs. Instead of just interested people, now we have faculty members sending newsletters with inappropriate images because it also has DALL-E built into it. And we're having to like rapidly educate. Like I just had a session this morning that we changed from like using ChatGPT as a lit review, or not lit review, but like an AI assistant, we changed it to Copilot because we just had no one is teaching about it because it was part of a software package that we already technically had with the USF Office 365 package. So it's been really cool, but it's also been way too fast rolled out.
Yeah, we have Copilot, or we just got Copilot at Duke, so it seems like that's the one that is making it somewhat easy for institutions to have a secure, like privacy-friendly enterprise version of it. And I think it's kind of interesting. I haven't like in some ways I still like ChatGPT even like more. I feel like the output is not quite the same. But I do think it's a useful one to share in that like Perplexity, it gives footnotes. So at least you can say, well, you can track down the information and check, whereas ChatGPT, like you just get nothing. So I think that comparison of what it means to have like information that has zero context or footnotes versus a tool that you can at least track down the original source. So Copilot's been one that I've been teaching more. I'll talk about ChatGPT and then say, but Duke has Copilot, and this is actually privacy friendly and like has some nicer features. But we don't have that integration with Microsoft Word, and I think that's what would really get students' attention, because that will give you the like grammar check and the, you know, like integration into your writing. That is something I think a lot of people are looking for.
Yeah, and I'm reading out of the Q&A too. A lot of folks have Cite.ai, and it sounds like a lot of folks are also either considering illicit or they're working on pricing and stuff like that. There's a couple of folks with ChatGPT 4, usually in small ways, or making you buy it yourselves, which if I want there to be a thumbs down reaction so I can thumbs down the concept of making you buy GPT-4 for yourselves. But it does sound like a lot more folks have Cite than I thought, and it's something that I haven't looked into as much as I'd like to. Oh, good question from Julia as well, like campuses that are building their own AI tools and whether librarians are contributing to those resources. I know, like, we have a lot of people who just have been doing AI research at UNC Wilmington. Sort of evolved. It's there's a lot of librarians involved in AI discussions here, but it sort of depends on like what part of the process. Like I don't do enough coding to be like truly involved in some of that, but we've definitely been involved in like, I'll help folks find data sets they can build a small language model on. And I don't know how that's looking for other folks too. Or if your campuses are building AI tools too, whether large or small.
Someone had just shared with me, I know, and this won't be surprising, but Harvard, who has a ton of money and resources, has built like a really big infrastructure for how AI is being used on campus. That like their website's really interesting because it shows they're looking at it from the research perspective, teaching perspective, learning perspective, and the work perspective. And I know they have built some custom like safe Harvard AI chatbots. And it's interesting because I feel like this need is coming up on campus where people are like, I want to build a chatbot, but it has sensitive data. Like, how can I do this? And there's not really like a person or like an infrastructure for how to connect people with, you know, the right resources. So I think that it's going to be a long trickle down as to like whether all of our universities can have like even a decent infrastructure for supporting all of the variety of ways you could be using it. But I like that the libraries are at the center of, you know, a lot of our professors are turning to us for guidance there. And I think that's been kind of a cool thing to see us have like a new role in this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also realized that we were about 4 minutes until the end. So kind of any final thoughts as we are wrapping up here from any of our panelists? I feel like my biggest takeaway from this is always that just like everybody is doing cool stuff, and I love hearing about all of the interesting stuff that everybody is working on and like how folks are already teaching about this. It's nice to, because sometimes you end up being like, I'm by no means the only person who's doing AI stuff, even in the library, but sometimes you end up feeling like you're doing it in a little bit of a vacuum. So it's really cool to see what other folks are doing with this and how they're using it in the huge variety of ways that we're teaching with it. I'm also, by the way, thank you so much for everybody putting all these resources in the chat. We are going to gather these up and share these out with the recording. For anybody who registered via ACRL, we will get the list of people and we will send you a recording. We will not just send 17 copies of this to Hannah Rozier, and we will make sure that you get access to all of these too. If our presenters are able to share a slide deck, we will also include all of that, and we'll just bundle it all together and send it off to y'all sometime relatively soon. And I can see our attendance drifting downward because as we close in on 4 p.m. Eastern. So thank you all so much for doing this with us. Like, this has been fabulous. This has been really, really educational. Thank you all so much for all of our chats and questions and resources.